Russian attacks have reportedly intensified in eastern Ukraine, prompting President Volodymyr Zelensky to call for, quote, total help from other countries to help defend his country. Military expert, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis joining us right now to discuss. Good morning to you. What's your assessment of where we are in the war right now? I mean, there seems to be no end in sight.
Well, you know, there probably isn't any end in sight to the actual war, but we do seem to be seeing some significant changes and movement in the Donbas fight, which is definitely the most important portion of the war so far, which is that the Russians have been making capturing several key towns, and they're continuing to just absolutely level sections of other towns, especially Severodonetsk in the northern shoulder of the Donbas area. And every time Russia makes these incremental advances, actually they're a little bit more than incremental these days. They're looking at kilometers per day. But the underlying problem is that they're also imposing casualties, significant casualties, up to 100 per day against the Ukrainian defenders. And you just can't stand that kind of casualty rate and continue to have the integrity of your defense hold. And I fear that in time you may see a pretty substantial breakthrough.
What is Putin's strategy right now?
What it appears to me, based on all that we've seen really for all 3 months of this war so far, is that he wants to destroy as much of the Ukrainian military as possible, more than capturing any particular territory, but to destroy their ability to defend, so that then he can potentially take the entire Black Sea coast all the way over to Moldova, which would then give him the entire southern part of Ukraine, and then capture all of the Donbas there. And then I think that there's a chance that he may say, all right, we'll now negotiate it into this war as long as we get to keep this part here. And of course, Zelensky has said he's not willing to cede any territory. And until one of those two changes, the war is going to continue on.
Oh, wow. And we continue to give them more money to try and help Ukraine. As that's going on, we're keeping a close eye on China. Secretary of State Antony Blinken did outline the Biden administration's China policy, going as far as to describe Beijing as the most serious long-term challenge to the international order. So what concerns you most about China right now, especially when you consider China moving forward to possibly invade Taiwan?
Well, I'll tell you what concerns me the most is the potential for us to expand China from being a significant challenge, something that we have to worry about and concern ourselves with, to being an enemy. And I fear that we may be going too far with that, because, you know, the classic thing is if you consider someone an enemy, they may later become so, because we have so much emphasis focused on the military aspects and not enough on healthy competition. Because look, that China is one of the biggest economic players in global economy, and certainly ours is connected to it a lot. And there's things that we can do to cooperate in some areas to our benefit. And we have to make sure we keep a very clear eye on how we can advance American interests and not just reflexively reject anything that has to do with China.
Yeah, in fact, you had some issues with the comments he made earlier that the U.S. would act militarily to help defend Taiwan. You wrote in an article, if the president does not rethink his position, Congress must step in to assert its war-making powers, because going to war with China when U.S. security is not threatened would be a mistake with potentially catastrophic consequences for America. But there's also consequences if China, wouldn't you say, invades Taiwan?
Oh, without question, there is. And it's in absolutely America's interest to prevent any kind of invasion of Taiwan by China. Everyone would lose if that happens, because, I mean, if on the surface of it, you know, there's, of course, the human dynamic first, that there was no telling how many casualties there would be. But then to the global economy, because of the microchip issue that so much of the world's supplies is developed there or produced there. And that would have, you know, ramifications across the board on the entire global economy if that were to happen. So it's in our interest to try to avert war, but not to push so hard that we inadvertently increase the chance of war. Because if we keep telling China over and over that we're going to defend Taiwan, instead of deterring China, that may make them think, then we better move now. So we have to be very careful that we don't, inadvertently harm our own position.
That's a very good point. And based on your expertise and everything you've seen so far, how soon do you think that could potentially happen, that China tries to go in and invade Taiwan?
Well, as I've written elsewhere in 1945, actually even recently in that national security publication, there is the potential that China could do it really at any time. They have the capacity right now that they could launch, and of course, if it comes, I'm almost certain that it's going to be a surprise, no notice thing that we're not aware of. And if that happens, it's going to be extremely difficult, even if we wanted to defend Taiwan, for us to actually get there. And so that's the real danger, that it could literally come anytime.
But do you think it would be similar to what happened with Russia, where they had to prepare their military, their troops along the border? Wouldn't we see some more movement of the Chinese military toward Taiwan?
Yeah, no, and China has been very, very thoughtful in progressively preparing their military to basically what's called a standing start launch, where they have their troops already positioned in a place where they can just launch with virtually no notice. They already have their tanks, they have their fuel, they have their Air Force forward deployed, they have their missile force, of course, all within range. So we wouldn't see any major movement, maybe 24, 48 hours before something would happen. And of course, then there would be no certainty that was going to happen. And there's nothing you can do in that short a period of time.
No, there certainly is not. That means we need to always be prepared too. All right, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, we appreciate you joining us this morning with your expertise. Fascinating conversation.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.